President Trump says his administration has shut down the threat of the coronavirus in the US after imposing strict travel rules with China. The latest death toll announced by Beijing is over 360, with more than 17,000 cases confirmed. Meanwhile, the 20 Democratic candidates vying for the presidency face their first big test in Iowa. This is the first of the primaries that will decide who takes on Trump in November. And 2 people stabbed on a busy London street by a convicted terrorist recently released from prison. The attacker reportedly being followed by undercover officers who shot him dead. For those of you just joining us, welcome to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, US President Donald Trump has played down the threat of the coronavirus, claiming to have shut it down in his country. The US is one of several nations imposing travel bans on China, while anyone who's visited China for the past 2 weeks is being called in for screening. Meanwhile, Chinese officials are struggling to contain the spread of the virus and are even using drones to monitor the population and prevent it from spreading. Monty Francis explains.
Like something out of science fiction, this drone equipped with a megaphone hovers before a crowd, blaring a warning. The operator, a local traffic cop.
You, the handsome man with the telephone, where's your mask? Put it on.
Hey, you on the bike, put on your mask when you're in the street. Don't endanger your fellow citizens.
Not all the drones are operated by public officials. Some of the clips have been posted by social media influencers hoping to encourage prevention.
Yes, Mom, it's the drone talking to you. You shouldn't come out without a mask. Go back inside and wash your hands. The drone can see you.
All of China is under alert. Here, just outside the capital, drivers must go through checkpoints. Entrances of most large cities are disinfected regularly. Fences are going up around certain neighborhoods. In the villages and countryside, people are taking prevention into their own hands. A 45-minute drive from Beijing, we found all the roads blocked. Visitors are not allowed to pass. In these towns, more than 1,000 kilometers from the epicenter of the outbreak, fear is spreading, even though no one here has been contaminated with the virus. It's not just the drones keeping watch. Volunteers are posted at the entrances of many towns with no intention of leaving their posts until it's safe again.
Well, as mentioned earlier, China has become increasingly isolated during the outbreak, with several countries imposing travel bans to China and repatriating their citizens from virus-hit areas. This Sunday, a second plane carrying French and other citizens arrived at a military base in the south of France.
Touching down at a military airbase in Istres in the south of France, the second French-chartered flight out of Wuhan in China, the city at the epicentre of the coronavirus outbreak. Relieved passengers capturing the moment they arrive back on French soil. 12 hours earlier at Wuhan airport, they had to undergo medical tests before being allowed on board. 250 people were on the flight, around 65 of them French. At nearby Aix-en-Provence, preparations are underway to receive some of the new French arrivals at a firefighters' training centre. Police are being drafted in to secure entrances and stop anyone leaving. Inside the centre, those being quarantined will have individual rooms. There's a restaurant and decontamination rooms at each of the entrances. Officials say none of the passengers show signs of being infected.
None of them have shown any symptoms of coronavirus, but of course more tests will be carried out.
Local residents appeared unfazed about their new neighbours.
Of course they had to be repatriated, and there are secure facilities here to look after them, so we're happy for us to be here.
The rest of the passengers are being taken to an isolated holiday camp near Marseille, where they'll be quarantined for 14 days. They'll join 180 other French citizens repatriated on Friday, an idyllic setting in strange circumstances. Masks are temporarily put aside to enjoy sea urchins, a local delicacy sent courtesy of a neighbourhood restaurant.
Now to the United States, where a crowded field of Democrats is chomping at the bit to be thrown into the presidential race against Donald Trump in 9 months' time. The opening primary will take place in Iowa this Monday, with Democratic voters having their say in the first of the primaries that will run until June. The latest polls show that Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren are the 4 frontrunners. Naomi Lloyd tells us more.
In the closing hours before voting starts in Iowa, the top 4 candidates vying to be Democratic presidential candidate made their last-minute pitches. Leading the moderate camp is Joe Biden, the former vice president seen by many as a steadying influence. With his granddaughter Finnegan alongside, he rallied supporters against Trump.
I've been reluctant to give him any nicknames. He loves giving people nicknames, usually derogatorily, but I do have a nickname I want to give him. Former President Donald Trump.
For those seeking greater change, Bernie Sanders tops the polls, even though many are concerned he could prove to be too divisive a figure. He spoke to campaign workers, volunteers and other supporters.
It is absolutely imperative that we have a vibrant democracy. I don't want billionaires buying elections. We don't want voter suppression.
US Senator Elizabeth Warren took to the stage at a rally in Indianola, promising voters to unify the party to take on Donald Trump.
But in the end, we all have one goal, and we better come together to meet that goal. We are going to beat Donald Trump. Yes.
Meanwhile, former Mayor Pete Buttigieg looked back on his rise from relative obscurity to national headlines.
That idea that yes, it makes sense for a mayor to run for president. Yes, it makes sense for a mayor from a middle-class neighborhood in the middle of the country, from a city that's not the biggest in the country. That's part of the point.
On Monday evening, Democrats in Iowa will cast their vote. All eyes are on the state as the last 7 out of 9 people who won here have gone on to clinch the Democratic nomination for president.
Well, now to the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson has promised fundamental changes to the way people convicted of terrorism are treated following a stabbing in a South London suburb. Undercover police quickly shot dead the attacker, a 20-year-old convicted terrorist who was under surveillance after recently being released from prison. He'd served only half of his 3-year and 4-month sentence. Fraser Jackson has the details.
The streets of Streatham in South London still cordoned off. Around 2 p.m. local time, a man brandishing a knife stabbed 2 people on this busy shopping street in what police are calling a terrorist-related incident.
I see people running, and behind these people with the young guy running with the vest, and also there was police running after him, chasing him with the gun.
Witnesses say the man was running along Streatham High Road wearing what turned out to be a hoax suicide vest. Plainclothes police officers fired 3 shots at him, later pronouncing him dead.
Armed officers who were part of a proactive counter-terrorism surveillance operation and were following the suspect on foot were in immediate attendance and shot a male suspect dead at the scene. The suspect had been recently released from prison, where he had been serving a sentence for Islamist-related terrorism offences.
The attack is strikingly similar to several others that have rocked the capital in recent years. In June 2017, 3 men wearing fake suicide vests mowed down pedestrians in London Bridge. After stabbing several people in Borough Market, the men were shot by police. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack that killed 8 people and injured around 50 others. In November last year, London Bridge suffered even more horror as a convicted terrorist was shot and killed after stabbing 2 people to death. That attack prompted British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to promise tougher terror sentences and to put an end to early release for serious offenders. On Twitter, he praised the emergency services' actions and gave his thoughts to those affected. London Mayor Sadiq Khan echoed those sentiments. In a statement, he said terrorists seek to divide us and destroy our way of life. Here in London, we will never let them succeed.
Anti-government demonstrators have been rejecting the nomination of Mohammed Alawi as Iraq's new prime minister. This 2 months after Adel Abdel Mahdi stepped down. The president confirmed Alawi's appointment, hoping he'll bring an end to months of violence in the country that have left some 480 people dead to date, many of them shot by the security forces. While hundreds of young people took to the streets in protest against Alawi, there were also rival sit-ins backing him as he's been backed by an influential cleric. Outrage at Donald Trump's peace plan between Israel and the Palestinians is continuing to grow across the Middle East. Well, a day after the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said he was cutting ties with the US and Israel, hundreds of people have been rallying in Lebanon, with some trying to storm the American embassy. Karis Garland has the details.
Burning the US flag, these protesters hope to send a strong message to Washington and Israel. Some Palestinian refugees and others Lebanese citizens. Their message is the same. The Middle East plan put forward by Donald Trump is unacceptable.
He's delusional if he thinks that Palestine is his and that Palestinian rights can be given away. This promise, the conspiracy of the century, will certainly fail.
The majority of Arab people reject the deal of the century, not only to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but because this deal touches upon all Arab issues, economic, social, political, and cultural.
There are more than 450,000 registered Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. They're fighting for the freedom to return to their country, but under Trump's proposal, they would be denied this right. Lebanon has rejected the White House's so-called peace plan, but says it supports the 2002 Arab Initiative for Peace, which includes the right for Palestinians to return and the establishment of an independent state with Jerusalem as its capital. Washington's proposal grants Israel full control of Jerusalem and allows it to annex the Jordan Valley and settlements dotting Palestinian territory. Most countries consider settlements on land captured during war a violation of international law.
Well, despite promising to unleash brutal physicality on the French, it was England that were walked all over in the Six Nations opener. An hour into the rain-drenched game, the Red Roses fell behind 24-0, failing to match the intensity of their young opponents. This before fighting back to gain 17 points and avoid complete humiliation. France 24's Julia Kim reports from the Stade de France.
That victory there for France, and it has rugby pundits wondering whether or not this marks a new era in French rugby. It was a victory that no one really expected from this new side, the youngest in the tournament. But Eddie Jones had promised a match of brutal physicality, and it was Fabien Galtier's side that had the England's 15 scrambling for answers. Now, France shone in the first half, marking 2 tries early on in the match within the first 20 minutes. Vincent Ratze and Captain Charles Olivon scoring. Both tries converted by Romain Ntamak, effortlessly converted. England fans saying that their side just didn't show up. Now, it's the first time in 32 years that England had failed to score in the opening first half of a Six Nations match. And it was an ominous portent for what was to come. England, though, in the second half did try to rally. But at one point, they were in France's 5-metre mark no less than 7 times, and yet still failed to score. That all changed, though, in the 55th minute, with Johnny May scoring 2 tries, both converted by captain Owen Farrell. Now, at that point, though, it was just too little too late. 24-17, the final score. England fans tipping their hats to this new rejuvenated French side. French fans, of course, absolutely elated. England now enters the tournament with a defeat under their belts, and France look like they're now the ones to beat.
And that's the end of this edition. Stay tuned to France 24.